What's going on, everybody? It is your boy Crypto Bobby. Hope you are having a great day, great night, wherever you're watching or listening in from. And we're back over 8K. People are preparing the Vegeta memes or whatever the hell they are, because I'm not a nerd. But what's up, Colton? How's it going, man?
What's going on, Rob? What a day. I'm emotionally exhausted.
Yeah, it's been a nice day for sure. I mean, this is one of the first kind of good feeling double digit moves we've had in a while. And Bitcoin and just the greater cryptocurrency market as a whole seems to have bounced back pretty nicely from the absolute devastation of Black Thursday and kind of the whole coronavirus S&P follow trick that we pulled for a while. So feels good to be not poor anymore, I guess we can say.
Right. It kind of reminds me of 2017. How about you? A little
Yeah, I
bit?
mean, we have Coinbase was down, Coinbase crashed, Coinbase Pro crashed, Kraken crashed.
Sounds about right.
So that that is not something that we've seen in a long time. Also, I think a lot of people are complaining as well, which maybe rightfully so. Pretty crazy that it is now 2020 and we have a lot of these popular exchanges that are unable to handle the kind of the traffic and the volume that they see on this type of day. But overall, pretty crazy day. I think Binance had its highest volume ever. I think it was, this completely off the top of my head, but I think it was $11 billion or something like that. Highest
Wow.
highest volume they've ever seen, which is nuts. So starting to see some interesting things going into the big day, the halving that's coming up in what, like 2 weeks or so now.
Yeah, just a couple weeks, what, 12 days, 11 days, something like that. Right around the corner. I mean, and it's I can't believe that just a little over a month ago we were at 3,800, and um, it just seems like yesterday, but I can't believe that we've kind of retraced completely now.
Yeah.
And there was a CME gap right up there at about 8,900 that was filled. All you CME gappers out there that love those, that was filled. There's another one up at 11,000. So fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But
And notable too, I think that there has been a lot of discussion around Bitcoin following the traditional markets, the S&P, and a number of the other traditional indexes out there. And now Bitcoin is actually, I think the block Larry Cermak published a post recently that Bitcoin is now outperforming the S&P kind of since the initial crash, which is crazy when you think about it, because Bitcoin dropped 60%, which is an absurd number, and we haven't fully recovered from that, but we're getting pretty close. So I think we're people are starting to feel good, which is always a dangerous place to be, but ultimately it's a nice spot. And I'll
yeah,
pose the question to you, Colton. Like, what do you feel like is fueling the rally? Is there anything in particular that you're looking at right now?
yeah, I think just a couple things. The first thing that comes to mind is just maybe the amount of short pressure. Shorts just getting roasted and squeezed throughout this entire run back up. And I'll put this back to you. I wonder if just the endless printing of money from the Fed and just the overall economy and people are uncertain. Like, is that something that is Bitcoin finally turning the corner?
I think that obviously, like Bitcoin's narrative in general, we would be in a nice place, right? You think about what's happening in just like the global economy right now. Basically, and all these, the Fed and all these just kind of central banks are printing their way out of it, and that is basically the antithesis to what Bitcoin is all about. You're about
Hmm.
sound monetary principles, quote unquote hard money, a predictable monetary supply. That is the exact opposite of what's happening right now. We have no idea what's happening with the Fed. You can see screenshots there circulating about the Fed making decisions for the United States based on Zoom. And there's a lot of things that are happening right there with the Fed and just globally speaking as well, not just in the U.S., that I think do kind of help Bitcoin's narrative. On the flip side, though, when you think about all the other kind of negative externalities that are happening, you question how much really does that matter in the long run. and how much is Bitcoin more just a risk on asset that has some pretty strong correlation to the S&P and the Dow Jones and all these other indexes right now for the time being. But when I look at it too, you got to think maybe a little bit about just like the narrative around Bitcoin, and whether that is just hodling digital gold and store of value, or if there are other narratives that are associated to that. I think you were talking a little bit before about just the rise in the hodlers, and how that's something that could maybe to some extent be driving this forward. Isn't that right?
Yeah, yeah, right. And thanks for bringing that back up. I think the hodling narrative is super important. The CoinDesk put out an article, Zach Lowell mentioning that Glassnode did some research, and over 3 million people now, or 3 million addresses, have at least zero point 0.1 Bitcoin, which is about $800 at this point.
Yep.
So, that doesn't mean 3 million different people do. Lots of people have different addresses, but still, it's just the what the hodling meme helps to accomplish is that essentially locks up um, the circulating Bitcoin that's out there. It essentially becomes more of a low float kind of stock, right? In financial terms. So um, that's interesting. More and more people just hanging on. And the other piece of it, I think, is the low barrier of entry to access to Bitcoin and these other cryptocurrencies, where, with Cash App, Swan, Bitcoin, River Financial, lots of these apps, Robinhood even has been around for a while. And
Hmm.
more retail traders can have access to Bitcoin. And not only that, they can set recurring buys. Just, hey, take it right out of the paycheck, bi-weekly, monthly. You can really set that up however you want. So I would say because of that, more people are just kind of just doing it, buying more Bitcoin. It's kind of mindless. It's becoming more mindless. And that narrative is kind of taking control. And the hodl meme is really, I think, helping Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I do also agree just on your kind of thought there as far as the maybe the improved ways at which people can buy and hold. I think River Financial and Swan and Cash App too, and Coinbase as well. I mean, you've always been able to do recurring buys on Coinbase, depending upon like the method that you use. But River Financial and Swan, they're basically their primary purpose is recurring buys and improving their reporting around that. Unfortunately for me, being in New York, I don't have access to anything cool in the crypto world. So thanks to the Bit license, thank you, Ben Lawsky, I am able to access basically nothing interesting and nothing cool at all. But the stuff that River Financial and Swan are doing, I think, is pretty great, and it allows people to perform dollar cost averaging in a more efficient and kind of mindless way and have better reporting when doing it. And when you break it down, for the most part, and there was some discussion on crypto Twitter the other day about how like 95% of traders would be better dollar cost averaging, and I think that's 100% true. Like,
Yeah,
you
maybe
are
90.
so much better off dollar cost averaging than you are trying to time the market up and down for the most part. There are some people that buck that trend, but I think greater that's true.
Right, I agree. I'm a dollar cost averager, not a professional trader, and that's definitely the way to go. Love that all these different companies are popping up and allowing more people to have
Mm,
access to those recurring buys. That's huge. Um,
totally.
yeah.
And speaking of things that kind of felt like 2017, this is something that reminded me a lot of 2017. And this was something that occurred today with the listing of UMA on Uniswap. And for those who aren't familiar, and I don't think that many people are probably familiar, I will link below to an article from the guys at Delphi Digital, who I think produce some of the best research in the crypto space, by the way. I have a subscription to their like entry level research essentially that they do, and these guys are great, and they're also like no BS, and they don't get into like arguments, or they just provide a bunch of great research.
Solid guys. Yeah.
But they put out this research about UMA in the past few days, and it was kind of interesting because this was essentially an ICO, and for anybody who was around in 2017, ICOs were absolutely nuts. Um, it was just a crazy time, especially if you were early on in the token sale game, where if you remember, you would just be, have an ETH address, and there would eventually be a smart contract address that would get printed on somebody's website. You would send your ETH there, hope won the gas war, and that you were able to get your ETH to that smart contract address before all the tokens got sold out. This was an interesting scenario because to give you a little bit of background, so this project called UMA, which is kind of, if you want to break it down, kind of like a MakerDAO or a Synthetics, where it has real world assets, or you can kind of tie assets to tokens in a pretty similar way to Synthetics, but they remove the concept of an oracle. But why it's interesting is they, rather than doing an ICO per se, they launched their token through liquidity on Uniswap. So what they did was they took an equal amount of Ethereum and they took an equal amount of their token. I think it was about $520,000 worth of Ethereum and $520,000 worth of their token. They put that into a liquidity pool at a specified time and basically set the price at, or the initial price, it didn't stay that way for long, but they set the initial price of their token at 26 cents, which was their seed round funding. And anybody could go into that and buy that token through the Uniswap pool. And the token immediately went from about 26 cents to $2, which was very reminiscent of the token sale, the ICO craze kind of back in the day, where you used to be able to go in, buy a token, immediately get it, and potentially flip it for 5, 10x or whatever it might have been, just because there was so much demand for it. This was a very similar type of situation. And I'm not going to say it's going to bring back the ICO, because I think a lot of people don't have any confidence in ICOs in general and tokens in general. But this mechanism was interesting overall. The problem with it is they have 100 million tokens and they only put 2 million in the Uniswap pool. So the actual price discovery for this is very low, and you have to extrapolate pretty heavily to get to a fully diluted supply. But the mechanism for this was cool because there's no KYC. There was no advantage for anybody else. You just had to be kind of smart and early and try to get that token at as low of a price as possible. And yeah, obviously it encouraged speculation. And after the token went from 26 cents to $2, and I think probably ended off at about 2.25, it's now back down to a little bit above $1. So there's certainly a cool down period. But this type of distribution method, I do think, could be interesting overall. And I've seen people call it like an initial DEX offering, an IDO. But
Change up one letter.
really
Yeah.
kind of interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not as familiar with this sort of thing as you are. So like my first thought, where like, this is sort of like the ICO, like, will people fall for this all over again? Because so many people got burnt in 2017 from
Mm-hmm.
these ICOs and thinking that they're going to 10x everything and then just getting dumped on. Right. So
Yep.
it makes me wonder, like, will people actually fall for this again? Will they be able to change it to IDO and people be like, oh yeah, sure, I'll send my ETH to this address and hope it 10x's? Like, what are your thoughts around that?
So the way this is structured is interesting, and again, I will link to I'll link to the research below. I'll also throw it up on the screen too. But the way it's structured is interesting because there are lockups on the tokens themselves. So you have a kind of a specified supply, and you can understand when people are actually going to be liquid with that supply. So you can't get dumped on immediately if you were to buy right now. And because of the amount of liquidity and the way Uniswap works, because of the amount of liquidity that went into the pool, basically, unless if everybody sells, the price goes back down to 26 cents if they keep the liquidity in the pool. So they set a floor of 26 cents, which Uniswap will likely stay the main exchange for this to happen. If you are an IEO, or an ICO, there was never like really liquidity floor. There was never floors on the price. Like, you might have ICO'd at $1, but if everybody buys your token, they can sell it like way under $1 because there isn't necessarily that liquidity pool on Uniswap. So it's interesting for a number of different reasons. I also think it flips the situation on its head a little bit, because rather than spending like the rumor that would go around, and this is uns- I don't want to say completely unsubstantiated, but like let's say the rumor is right now you want to get listed on Binance, you have to pay whatever $1 million or something crazy. You have to pay a lot of money to get listed on an exchange like Binance. Maybe that's not the case, but that's what people would rumor about and bitch and moan about. So let's just say you have to pay $1 million. That may or may not be true. Um, Rather than pay $1 million to get listed on a centralized exchange, you can take that $500,000 of your token, that $500,000 of Ethereum, throw it into a Uniswap pool, and now anybody can go into that pool and buy and sell without KYC. So theoretically, I think it's actually a better scenario for a lot of those individuals. You don't need market makers to be behind your token or anything like that.
Hmm.
So it is a more, I guess, like quote unquote decentralized type of approach. That doesn't necessarily mean the token itself is valuable at all. It doesn't mean that there is any utilization potentially for the token, whether it's UMA or anything else. But the actual mechanism for launching the token is a little bit fairer than perhaps what we've seen before, but you still have the issues around, hey, do you actually need a token for this? Does this is this product even going to be successful? Who knows? But it was a fun kind of unique way to launch a token, and I think it also can in the future, and they've started to do this with certain things like Uniswap socks and some other physical things in the real world, but also like non-fungible NFT tokens. You're starting to see this type of kind of Uniswap pooled automated market maker launch go into effect to set the price of different things in the world.
That's interesting. Yeah, there's it's a new type of ICO, quote unquote. So it definitely will be interesting to see how UMA plays out, and if this draws some more liquidity and just overall attention. Um, we
Yeah.
don't have to get into this, but another thought popped into my head like during this is, you know, regulation wise,
Oh yeah.
you can't. Yeah, who's going to crack down on that? How would they even do that? Who's responsible? I mean, there's just so many questions around that, and
Hmm.
who knows?
Yeah. Well, so and I'll caveat this with the obvious thought that I'm not a lawyer and I have no idea what's happening. Um, but um, and I think UMA was actually kind of interesting because they did this with before they launched. So apparently UMA's launching next month. UMA's been around for a while. They've had like a beta product on the Rinkeby testnet on Ethereum, but they haven't fully launched yet. So they did this about a month before launch. And I think it could be interesting if they do these types of launches when there actually is a product built, because then there is real clear utilization, at least from now for the next month. For the most part, the only purpose for this UMA token now is going to be speculation, which
Right.
that's 99.999 of the crypto industry as a whole anyway. But there's I to my knowledge there's nothing you can do with the token at this moment. However, that's one thing that'll be, I guess, perhaps worthwhile to watch is, are other companies or other projects going to do anything like this? And are they going to do it closer to when it launches? Because to me, it would make sense if they were to do this, like, say, today and they launch tomorrow or something like that,
Hmm.
because there is instant utility to the product. Like, people should be using the token for its intended purpose. Now, we kind of have a month-long period of just pure speculation. And in a regulatory sense, speculation, I think, is not always the best thing in the world.
No, yeah, I like that idea too. It makes it much less sketchy. If you
Mm,
have 24 hours in between launch, and then and listing the token, then a month.
yeah.
So that could be
Well,
interesting moving forward too.
and going back to the fact that I am not a lawyer and I don't, this is just this is my personal ramblings on it. But to that point, it's actually not to that point at all. But to the favorite subject, pump it, dump it this week. Last week we had an interesting one. So pump it, dump it, hot seat, cool throne. Colton, what are you pumping up this week? What are you thinking about?
Well, lockstep with the price increase, I think there is in my circle of people a lot more interest in Bitcoin. From the normies, from the no coiners out there. people that ever see it in the headlines every once in a while,
Mm.
like, hey, Bitcoin's moving up or down, that sort of thing. Um, just today with the price move, I'm known as just the Bitcoin guy in my circle. So it's
Oh,
there are
are
lots
you?
of
Are you?
lots of it's a small circle, yeah. Um, Lots of texts, like, hey, what's going on with Bitcoin, whatever,
You rich
and
yet?
so a lot more interest being generated. It's price is still very much connected to overall sentiment, I think, but yeah, that's definitely pumping.
Yeah. For me, I'm pumping Fed stimulus. There was some conversations today with the Fed. Fed has basically gone out and had the green light to just print money into oblivion. And part of me is like, you know what? My 401k and my stock portfolio is now not dead. So thank you, Fed, for just printing a bajillion dollars. So thanks for that. On the flip side, I think this could have some negative consequences. So maybe not the best idea to just print all the money in the world until things happen. But the Fed is definitely pumping out stimulus to individuals, to corporations, none of which are me, but they are pumping out money. So it's
Yeah.
a crazy time in the world of the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, it's nuts. That brings us to the opposite. What is dumping this week? What's dumping? Rob, what do you got?
I'm gonna go with just like the collective sanity of the world. Um, the longer we stay in lockup, the more agitated people are getting. And people are just going absolutely, whether it's at each other's throats or just their hot takes in general. It's like we're just locking people in quarantine, and there's just this steaming pile of hot takes that are just developing on a continual basis. I mean, even on the subject of just like what's happening right now in general, you have, I felt like this would happen for a while, but you have this like bubbling, bursting, just it's like a powder keg basically. On one hand, you have the people that are like, we need to end the lockdown right now. Like, this is ridiculous. We need to end the lockdown right now. And then on the flip side, you have the people that are like, no, you're gonna kill everybody in the world, and you're an idiot if you don't want to end the lockdown. And really, the truth is probably, as is everything in life, the answer is always somewhere in the middle. Like, you can be sympathetic and empathetic on both sides of the house. I think that the people that want to end the lockdown, you're nuts if you think that the economy is just gonna like somehow be okay by locking everybody indoors, kind of completely cutting off consumption and removing 26 million jobs out of the equation. Like, you're nuts if you think that that is not going to be, that's going to be just a-okay. And then also on the other end of the spectrum, you have the people that are like, hey, we need to continue the lockdown. Certainly they have their own, like, there's probably going to be a spike if we just end the lockdown like willy-nilly and go about things like nothing ever happened. So there's probably some answer in the middle, but both sides are just getting louder and louder and crazier and crazier.
Yeah.
And the longer this shit continues on, the crazier it's going to get.
Right. People are just getting angrier and angrier, like the longer people stay
And I'm just going
indoors.
to drink a beer. So
Yeah, it's only 2:45 here, so I guess I'll just stick to water for now.
yeah,
But
yeah,
um
you better.
what I'm dumping this week, and it's totally not crypto related or uh, global macro
Mm.
anything related, but weddings. I feel bad for everyone out there that has had a wedding or was supposed to have a wedding in the last
R.I.P.
couple
in
of
peace.
weeks and also in the coming months. Weddings are dumping, and I feel bad because I have like 4 friends that were supposed to get married this month and next, and their weddings were canceled.
Canceled
That
the
seems
bachelor
terrible.
parties.
Yeah, I was supposed to go to Mexico, and I was supposed to go to Nashville. Dump it, dump it. Nope.
That sucks. Those are
It's
two.
terrible.
I mean, those are two good places for
I
weddings.
know,
Yeah,
I know. I was looking forward to it. But yeah, I just feel for everybody out there that's
yeah.
having to reschedule their wedding to next year. Yikes.
No. I'll pass. But and to the point too. So we've travel, remote work, that remote, just anything, remote weddings. You guys don't know, Colton and I are behind Proof of Talent. We run a recruiting firm that works primarily with companies in the blockchain and cryptocurrency world. We work with about 15 different companies right now, mostly in the United States. But every episode, we like to finish off with a conversation on the subject of working in the blockchain industry in particular, sometimes some job interview tips and that type of thing. But today, wanted to just touch on remote work in general, and whether or not it's like a trend that's here to stay or not. I think
Mhm.
obviously if you are in a white collar job right now, you likely have the luxury of working from home, remote work, and you probably have a lot of opinions on this. Maybe you worked from home before, maybe you didn't, but after all this is said and done, what's going to happen with remote work? Colton, what do you think?
Oh man, yeah, a lot of opinions on this, a lot of hot takes and terrible takes out there on
Always,
remote work, and
always
if
hot
it's here.
takes, always terrible
Yeah,
takes.
right. I of course, fall somewhere in the middle, but I lean toward remote work definitely sticking around and probably more people going remote in the future for a couple reasons. I think from the employee side, there's there's a lot. It just seems healthier, right? Like you can go about your day. You can if you get up early and work, you like to work early in the morning. You can get up a little bit early. You can work. You can take a break. You can go exercise. You can eat. Then you can get back on the horse and work some more. And then, it just, you have much more flexibility. Even, if you want to get to the nitty gritty from a diet perspective, I don't know about you, but when I was going into an office, I wasn't packing a lunch every day. I was going around the corner, getting a cheeseburger, getting a burrito. Like, I think from a health perspective, and from an employee perspective, it's a little bit more beneficial, plus no commute. And if you live in a place like San Francisco or the Bay Area in general, you can't go 15 miles in under like 3 hours. So no commute is definitely a huge plus on that front.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating to think about it from like the like quote unquote business owner perspective, because
Hmm.
I've watched, I guess, and I've listened to like a couple different like owners, especially in the recruiting space. I'm sure that's not a place that a lot of people are in, but there are some guys that I listen to that have their own businesses, and some are very much in the remote train, and some like can't wait to get back to working in the office. And you have pluses and minuses, like you said, to both. Like, I think there is something to be said about being in the same office with somebody and like being able to build a relationship with them.
Hmm.
And that it's pretty difficult, if not impossible, to fully replicate that on Zoom or something like that. Even though I got a sweet Zoom T-shirt on, shout out Ryan Burns.
Yes, sir.
Um, but there are a lot of like fantastic trade-offs. You don't have to pay rent. And that can be, if you are in a big area, big city, office rent can be a huge expense. Like there, you don't have to, from an individual perspective, you don't have to commute. You can kind of set your own hours a little bit. You can determine your day a little bit more. If you have to go to like the remote work, I feel like is a lot more employee centric in a lot of ways, whereas in office work is much more maybe like owner centric or just executive leadership centric, where it's like, all right, I can see every single person in the office on a daily basis. I know what they're doing. I know they're being productive. And I think some people just hate to relinquish that control, because it definitely is control. Like you can say, your ass better be in your seat at 8:30 in the morning. Otherwise, you do that twice in a row, you're getting fired. Like I've worked at companies that have been like that in the past, and I've also worked at companies that have been remote.
Hmm.
And you do whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it, as long as you just get your shit done. So I think that the world is going to, as more employees work remotely, I think more people are going to realize that there are benefits to it and that they're going to like it. I don't think
Hmm.
everybody is naturally going to flip remote and everybody's going to be working remotely, but I think this is going to accelerate that progression a little bit. However, there are a lot of people that don't like, simply just don't like working remote. So
Right. It's very industry specific too.
yeah,
And I mean, from a recruiting perspective, you increase your talent pool when you open it up to remote.
that's the biggest thing
It's
in
huge,
my mind.
huge. I mean, there's so much talent out there. Like, you work in New York City, your headquarters in New York City, and there's a ton of talent in New York. But I mean, you're missing out on everyone. Like San Francisco's a huge tech hub.
Yep.
A lot of software companies out here, if you're in that industry, like you want to tap into that.
Mm.
So if you open it up to remote, and there's a lot of companies popping up that are very kind of help companies transition from no remote to remote, and they help them get all the equipment that they need, help them with training their management and their executives on how to manage remotely.
Yep.
Because I mean, there's definitely some trade-offs there, like you said. I mean, from a management perspective, remote management would be a lot tougher, at least to start.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that is, to me, at least from like a leadership or ownership perspective, and from the clients that we work with too. Sometimes you want to just hit your head against the wall because you have a fantastic candidate. Like, let's say there's an awesome candidate in Seattle, perfect fit for a job, but doesn't want to move from Seattle to San Francisco. Like, that person can do the job, but that company in San Francisco wants somebody that works alongside them in San Francisco. And
Hmm.
you as a recruiter, or just as somebody that works with these companies, you can't tell anybody what to do. But the biggest thing, the biggest advantage, I think, that you want, or one of the biggest advantages that you do get, is you widen up that talent pool to outside of a 30-mile radius, or outside of 15-mile radius, which is really beneficial because there are a lot of people that do enjoy remote work, and they are highly capable employees, and they might even have lower cost of livings, and you can afford, you don't have to pay them as much as you might if they were in that specific city. But that type of thing is a huge bonus to allowing your employees to truly work remotely, especially into the future. And I think that you're starting also to see now this like exodus a little bit, or these people talking about this exodus. I could have even talked about this in the in the pump it or dump it section, in the pump it section. A lot of talk now from people about the exodus of the cities, moving out of San Francisco, moving out of New York City. And that's fine. Like, I think it's not as fun to live in New York City, or it's not as fun to live in San Francisco, or as fun in a big city when you're confined to 800 square feet or however big your apartment is, and you can't go to the bars, the restaurants, or all the cool things that you like about being in your city. Obviously, that sucks, but maybe take a hike outside of your city, actually stay there for a while, realize there's not that much to do there either, and when it all said and done, I don't know.
It's a lose-lose, when you really break it down sometimes. But overall, on the remote train, I think there will be a massive spike of people just wanting to get back to the office and
Mm,
like be in touch with people. And then it'll slowly taper back to normal. And then I think there will definitely be a gradual increase in remote flexibility from companies across the board in just about every industry.
yeah, yeah, 100%. I definitely agree.
Yeah.
But outside of remote work, back to Bitcoin, it should be a fun time. I mean, queue up those Bitcoin 9,000 memes. We got
Bring on
ETH
10.
above $200. Yeah, bring on
Bring on 10.
5-digit Bitcoin again. Um, I mean, we're all in it for the tech. It has nothing to do
Blockchain.
with the price. In it for the decentralization, and in it for the tech. Insert the meme of the dude standing there with the gold chains around him. But
Yeah.
Colton and I will be around per usual. And if you guys are interested ever in careers in the Bitcoin, blockchain, cryptocurrency world, our details at Proof of Talent are always below. So make sure to hit us up. But thanks so much for the time. Colton, I'll leave it to you for the outro because you always nail it, man.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, guys, for listening. See y'all next week.
Cheers, everybody.